Hello, world, and welcome to the Crisis Victory Show. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley, and I'll be your host, and I am the executive producer of this show. This is our first show that we've had on air live, and we're so excited to share with you a person of extreme interest that has survived extreme crisis events. This is a lady friend of mine that I've known for a few years, and then we were originally connected by my designing and creating a book called Surviving a Double Life. As time went on, I didn't acquire enough interviews to create the book. So what we did is create a Crisis Victory podcast show instead. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my very first guest on the manifestation of the very first episode, with many more to come. Her name is Lisa Drennan, and she has an amazing story to share with us today. Lisa, good morning.
Good morning.
It's
How are
so
you?
exciting. I'm good, dear. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, we're going to get into your story here, but what I'd like to do as we create the story, we will do a time frame sequence. My first question that I'd like to ask you about, and this is the most important one I think of the entire interview. What prompted you to go down the path that you ended up going down in life? And at what age were you at when you started down that path?
Well, I would have to say what prompted me was severe poverty. I was at a point in life where I was a single mother, a teenage mother, and I had at that time a couple children and didn't have any income whatsoever. I couldn't take looking into their eyes crying because they were hungry and not having any food and not having any money. And I knew I needed to do something. And I'm not going to say that was a good choice, but I had to make a choice.
I understand.
I
Believe me,
think
I
I was
understand.
about, yeah, I think I was about 18 or 19 at the time when I actually went out to the street.
Was this your own decision or were you groomed?
I cannot say that the seed was not planted years before, after I had my first child, when I was about 16. The seed was planted, um, but no, it was my decision. I lived in a neighborhood that was very near one of the main strips, which in that day it was called Union Avenue, and now it's called MLK Boulevard. But um, yeah, so I lived like a couple of blocks from Easy Money. Um,
What city are we talking
I
about?
can't say it was easy though. This is Portland, Oregon.
Okay, so you were important at the time that your journey in this path started.
Yes,
Okay, now I remember in our
yes,
earlier interview where we discussed the work we were going to do in a book at one time that you had ended up in Los Angeles. Was this shortly after you entered into the industry, if you will?
no, that was many years later. Many years
Okay,
later. That would have been in my later 20s. I've actually been to several different states. LA was one that I frequented. San Francisco was also one that I frequented. Phoenix, Arizona, several others. Yes,
interesting. I also
Las
know that
Vegas.
it's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. At some point in time, you even worked in the sex trade houses in the state of Nevada. I believe that you worked in the Mustang Ranch for a period of time. Can you share with us what
Yes,
that
yes, I did.
experience was like? Was it a more safe environment? Was it a an environment that was controlled where you guys that were working in your industry didn't have to worry about assault or kidnapping or rape or the things that you've shared with me that you've survived?
Yes, it was a controlled environment. It was, in my opinion, extremely safe. They had panic buttons in the room in case anything went bad. Um, they had staff 24 hours a day up and around. The hallways were very similar to like a hotel room hallway,
Mhm.
with multiple doors. A lot of people around 24 hours a day. So it was very safe. We also had to see a doctor every week and get blood tests every month. Condoms were not necessarily mandatory, but they strongly suggested we use them. So yes, and in those senses, it was safe. That the emotional and psychological damage that happens, just anyone in that life, takes a long time to notice. But when you notice it, it's way harder to repair.
How does that compare to working out on the streets where you're subjected to so many horrific and dangerous scenarios that you've shared with me in the past?
If I'm going to be honest, it's a much healthier environment physically.
Emotionally?
So that's kind of a catch-22. So the work itself has long-term effects and long-term destruction. Your value and your worth, get monetized. And so in the long term, there are significant damages that happen. But in the physical and in the moment, I would have to say that it is a much healthier environment when it is in a controlled environment, such as the Mustang Ranch. Simply because we know we're safe in there. We know that nobody's gonna, get away with just, brutally beating us. We know nobody's gonna get away with pulling weapons on us. We know, you know what I mean? So there's that aspect. But again, the long-term effect of our self-worth as women is drastically affected.
How does it compare working in the Mustang Ranch to when you were working out on the streets in relation to working with other women and that would be in your vicinity? Was it, did you guys that worked in the ranch get along real well compared to the women that were working out on the street corners? Can you share that with us?
I would have to say so, because on the street, it's competition. I mean, it's nothing but competition. We are battling for the same money, and in the Mustang Ranch, it is, we line up and the guy chooses. It's super simple. It doesn't, I mean, like there's really no need for competition because we all know that we're going to get paid, eventually, and, some charge more, some didn't, so they did have a minimum base cost, and that we had to split with the house. So in that scenario, everyone that worked in the building, benefited from every person that came in the door.
Interesting. Another question that I have for you, Lisa, is when you were out there working on the strip, did you have people approach you that would take control of you, that wanted to basically be your pimp? And how would you deal with that when you were confronted with those?
Just run. So they're really the only way I can describe it is, and yes, that, people would come up and kind of chase you down the street, like literally, depending on where you were, in what city. Like San Francisco, for instance, they kind of have designated sections of the town at night, that certain persons would go to find sex, and sex workers. And the sex workers knew, the police kind of had them sectioned off, not, it was kind of it was just designated areas, basically. The women who were in the sex industry were in one section, the addicts that were in the sex industry were in another section, and then transgender and that demographic was in another section. So we all kind of stayed in our sections, and in my experience, it didn't matter which section you were in, somebody was going to chase you down the street and try to procure you. So sorry, I can't even say that word.
Well, they would try to recruit you, as I take it.
Yeah, they'd try to recruit you and secure your funds and whatever, so yeah, I mean, you just run. You just kind of, in your stilettos, you just run down the street. So and try to get away from them. If you need to jump in somebody's car, you do. If you need to jump on the bus, you do. So it's go into a store, whatever. So
Well, as we develop a story today, and I know that you're
it's a very
interested in,
predatorial business.
yes, and I'm excited for you to share with other women that are considering going into this, have contemplated going into this, and also of those that have been in this and how they can get out, which I know that you've done a lot of work in that regard. And we'll get into that later. But right now, my concern is the safety issues that so many of you are confronted with when you're out there. Now, you've shared with me in the past a couple of situations where you were almost murdered. And I would really like for you to share that to the audience so the younger women that are
Yes.
listening to this today can get an idea before they make that fateful step into that industry. I'd like for you to share to them just exactly what they may be confronted with if they make that choice. Can you do that, please?
Yes. So yes, early early on, after making my initial choice to take that route, I was regularly abused, regularly grabbed by the throat, and not paid for services. So basically raped. That would happen on a regular basis. I've been left in the woods, beaten and bloody. I've, yeah, it's hard to talk about. So, I mean,
Take your time. Take your time.
yeah, there's really nothing um, positive that's going to come out of it ever. Um, I've had my head smashed in with blunt force objects. I've had bones broken, black eyes, bruises. Um, I've, I've, I know that I have come across many murderers, and was simply by the grace of God able to fight my way out. I mean, I come from a very abused background as well, just in my personal relationships. And had I not known how to protect myself, I would not be here today. I can promise you that I would not be here today. If it wasn't for my faith in God, I would not be here today. I cannot even count how many times I've literally said, God help, and something would happen. Either a cop would see me, or a neighbor would turn on a light, or a truck would drive past me wandering down a dark, wooded area, bloody, I mean, like it's simply by the grace of God and God's protection that I'm here.
Well, Lisa, as you well know, this is my 19th year working in the homeless community. I work in trap houses. I work in extremely dangerous environments with people that literally trade their flesh for the next $20 fix. They don't care at that time.
Yep.
All they care about is the fix. I've had overdose cases brought to me frequently where I administer Narcan kits to them here. I average 2 to 3 of those a year. And what people do that are like in our circumstances, where we both survived extreme crisis events in our lives, is we offer a place of solitude where they can come to and they know they're not going to be molested. They know that they're not going to be judged. They know that they're in a sanctuary, if you will, much like what you've shared with me at the work that you do today for people that come to you for advice and guidance. And I find that the majority of the young women that I've seen women 14, 15, 16 years old,
Yeah.
sitting on a couch in a trap house, waiting to slam that next bag of dope. And they literally trade themselves for that next hit. And it's heartbreaking to me. And one of the things you hit on earlier that really interested me was the self-esteem scenario that people go through. Not everybody is a strong survivor like you, Lisa. A lot of these
Right.
women not only carry it for many, many years, but don't find or seek a solution as to how they can realize their benefit and their value to humankind like you do today. And the emphasis of this meeting today that you and I are sharing to the world is to introduce to these younger women and younger men that are out there contemplating entering into the sex trade business, and your advice to them, as you are now a certified counselor. You work with people like this. And I really want them to hear from your heart how you not only survived the experiences that you did, Lisa, but what you've done in so regard as rehabilitating yourself, mending the life that you are into the beautiful, wonderful person you are today that I know very well. Can you share with them in your moment of crisis where the switch clicked in your mind and you said, enough is enough. I'm going to turn this around. And this is how I'm going to escape from this environment. Can you tell them, please?
That was many years into the life. I spent my entire life in addiction. I was an addict before I ever even knew what the things that I were doing were drugs. Um, I was given drugs at a very young, at like grade school age, to begin with, drugs and alcohol and cigarettes. Um, a lot of the people who would give me the drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes were pedophiles, obviously. There is a lot of coercion involved with the sex trade, drug trade, as we both know.
Yes.
That is, drugs are typically the main way. And I don't speak just from my own experience, but I speak from what I've also witnessed.
Yeah.
I can honestly say that I'd say at least 98% of the young women or young men that I know that are on opiates were coerced into opiates by someone who was well over twice their age,
Mm.
for sexual reasons. Um, what better, it's way easier to rape somebody when they're passed out on opiates, and they won't know
Yes.
anything when they wake up, so I've literally witnessed people trying to do this in front of me, and so I've always been that person that would stop them, and I also have had to revive people from opiate overdoses, some
Yes.
as young as teenagers as well. I'm sorry, can you repeat your question again? Because I've lost track.
I
So,
think you pretty well answered my question, Lisa.
okay.
What is the effect, if you will, to somebody that is dealing with low esteem issues as a result of the choices they made going into the sex industry?
Lack of boundaries, lack of personal love, lack of self love.
Yeah.
Somewhere,
Yeah.
somehow, they've been convinced that they deserve this. Whether they have glamorized it and deserve it, or whether they believe they are, that they're being, the punishment part, the abuse is just what they deserve. I mean, it's sick. It is insanity. The long-term effects, I got to a point, I think one of part of your question was what made me switch. And
Yes.
the
Yes.
part that the place where I switched was when every day I was trying to figure out how I could kill myself, how I could die without killing myself. Like I would literally pray for a serial killer or a bus or a train or something to just end my life. I would shake my fist in the air. I write poetry about this. I would shake my fist in the air at God, asking him why he has me here. Why do you have me going through this? And the beauty of what I do today is it makes all of my suffering make sense. He
Yes.
had a purpose for everything that I went through. I would not be able to share my story, and I would not be able to show anyone else how to get out of the life if I wasn't able to do it myself.
Yes, amen to that too. We're both survivors of crisis event backgrounds, both of us, and we're both people who are very well established in our faith with God through Christ. And I absolutely love that about you because we can't, in my situation in my life, I was an international smuggler for various cartels in Mexico. That I became the largest distributor in the history of the Pacific Northwest during the cocaine years. You also know that one day I said I'd had enough, and I walked into the U.S. Attorney General's office and decided to take on the very cartel that controlled my life. Absolutely know I was facing death, absolutely knowing
Yeah.
that it was imminent. But what really catapulted me into making that decision was not only the negotiation in Culiacan, Sinaloa, where I flew down there, negotiated the ending of my business, and to turn it over to someone else, where they said, yes, 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 we're happy for what you've done. We're happy to put it into someone's town. And I came home and I had a third of a ton of cocaine waiting for me. As an underboss, I turned that load around, and the following day I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office. That was my turning point. The other thing regarding the sex trade business, I've seen sex trafficking done down in Mexico and Central America, houses where I'd be there for narcotic conversations and look down hallways and see rooms full of children that were being ready to be moved north. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. And those
Yeah.
pictures in my mind, their faces to this day haunt me. And I feel a guilt because here I was in an environment. Why didn't I shoot every son of a bitch in the house and rescue those kids? I had the capability at that
I
time to do
probably would
so.
have. Just
No.
saying.
Well, given the circumstances,
Just saying.
it's not as easy as that, as you and I well know. We've been out there.
I know.
But
I
you,
know.
but the haunting experience is that during those times in our life, we were unable to do what we felt in our soul that needed to be done. So my question to you is this: today, when you see a
Anything.
young, yes, and
Yes.
when you see young people out there today, and you do because you work in that environment, and now you're in the recovery mode of helping people find a way out, find a solution to restoring
Yes.
self-esteem, finding that journey that takes all of the critical things that they have survived and turns it into a humanitarian aid. I mean, people come to you, Lisa, as I've seen over the years now in the development of your career programs that you're creating to help these people. They come to you because you've been there, done that, and been through it. And this is what this message today is primarily instituted for. The Crisis Victory Show is being designed to first talk about severe crisis events and to second show how we take those events and turn it into a humanitarian scale.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember when I walked in and agreed to work with the Department of Justice to take down the Pacific Northwest faction of the largest cocaine trafficking organization in its history. I knew full well I'd be going to prison. And when I ultimately did get sentenced to prison, I immediately entered my seminarial studies, became a certified hospice counselor while I was in prison. I worked in the education department to help other prisoners get their GEDs, on and on and on. The important thing was
Sorry.
bless you, sister.
Thank you.
The important thing to do is to make time in our life and our life journey to be able to not only withdraw from the low self-esteem visages that we have created and carry, but to take and manifest all of that which was evil and bad into something that gives God glory and is good.
Yes.
Can you share that part of your journey?
Yes. So when I first decided to get clean and sober and change my life, I didn't know how. I mean, like I didn't understand. I have a lot of trauma around. Like the majority of my trauma revolves around men and allowing the misuse of my own personal body and things of that nature. So I can honestly tell you that when I finally stopped and I finally got clean and sober, I was extremely angry. I mean, like they say hell has no fear. I can promise you that's the case. So I literally had to change everything. I had to cut off everyone in my life. I had to cut off my, like I moved out of my comfort zone. I moved into a neighborhood that, into the downtown area that was very run down, and went to a recovery home called the Housing Rapid Response Program through Central City Concern here in downtown Portland. And at first, the first time I went, I only lasted about 6 months. I didn't stop the relationship that I was in. It was an abusive relationship, a very drug involved relationship, very manipulative. And when I relapsed, that took me 6 years to come back. It took me 6 years to come back to recovery. And in that 6 years, the abuse and the trafficking and everything it got too much. I was beginning to lose my mind. I can honestly say I was hearing voices. I was audible hallucinations. I was nearly psychotic. I knew that I had no choice. I either needed to get clean or I was going to die. I needed to change my life or I was going to die. And I was going to die, suicide by rapist or suicide by, a building or, I mean, like there was going to be something. It was either death or find something different. So I went back to recovery and cut off everyone in my life. I immediately knew that I wanted to help others. I've always been that kind of protector and big sister and, best friend, during my work as a prostitute. I did a lot of, um, I had a lot of people that wanted me to act out as their child or someone else's child. And did a lot of I really don't want to use the word counseling, but that's kind of, people would just come in and just start telling me whatever was bothering them, and why they were here. And it was crazy. So there was always been like a healing kind of spirit about me. So when I got clean and sober, I struggled a lot with, my thought processes. I struggled a lot with my self-esteem and my self-love. I had to actually learn what boundaries were.
Yes.
I,
Yes.
the only boundary I had was how much money is in your wallet. So it's still I mean, even 4.5 years later, it is still a struggle to set and stand on healthy boundaries. It is something that I feel very empowered by having. I had to watch other women because in the life there's not many women would gravitate towards me, and so now
Yeah.
I pay very close attention to women who have qualities that I admire, like grace and feminine energy and God, husband, all of these things that I
Yes.
wish
Yes.
I could have had over the years. Um, so the transformation for me has been mind blowing. I mean, it's like the difference between Mercury and Pluto as far as
Yes.
like what's gone on in my life. And I mean, it's amazing.
Well, you hit on 2 points that I'd like to bring back to life right now. One of them, and this is really good advice to the people that are following your story right now: environment and people. Number one, first and foremost, when I was an international drug smuggler, that was
Yes,
one of the things I had to cut off immediately. And you've done that.
yes,
And the other thing is, it isn't counseling, it's comforting. And you identified that, you say that, well, it was like counseling. And I get that exactly. It isn't, we're not counselors yet. We're still coming through the fog of the life that we had made the choices in that put us there. But we do find ourselves comforting other people. And that was
right.
a trademark relationship that developed between you and I in the beginning years. We sense that in both of us, both being critical survivors of extreme events. One of the events I'd like you to touch on, when we were discussing the books scenario a few years ago, you talked about an incident. I believe it happened up in Portland. It was a snowy night. Going to their house or something like that. I can't remember the details, but it was one of the parts of your story that I did want to share, how you survived an extreme crisis event in the moment that you found yourself in it. Do you remember that part of the story? Are you okay to talk
So
about it? Are
I
you
believe you're
okay?
talking about, yes, I believe you're talking about the last incident where my life was in danger.
Yes.
Um,
Yes,
it
I am.
was extremely cold. It was extremely cold and windy. It wasn't quite snowing, but it was definitely freezing cold. And uh, it was New Year's Eve, and I had the opportunity to go see my children the next day, and I wanted to make sure that I had some money in my pocket to go have some fun, go do anything other than just sit and stare at each other, and
Yes. Yes.
um, try to enjoy the moment. And there was a gentleman that kept driving by and kept driving by and kept driving by and kept driving by, and finally, when he picked me up, um, I always made sure. Oh, well, I can't say always, but after many years of going through horrific things,
Yeah.
I I developed skills to protect myself. And one of them would be to park in areas where I knew that if I needed help, I could get it. And if I needed to run away, that I had somewhere to go. So I parked in an area that I knew, that in an apartment complex parking lot, that I knew people who lived there, and I knew that there was a plenty of traffic around. If I needed to run, I could get away, and if I needed to run to someone's door, I could get in, things of that nature. So um, This person kept fumbling around, I can't find my wallet. Well, when I first got in the car, there was a mag flashlight, the police size mag
Yes.
flashlight,
Yes.
kind of perched in between the seats against the dash. And so when I first got in the car, I saw that and I grabbed it, without them knowing it. I kind of, when they had their head turned, I just grabbed it and I put it on the other side of me next to the door.
So you were
So
already
when we
sensing.
parked,
You were already sensing
yeah.
something was up.
Well, see, I learned the hard way that as soon as I get in the car, I look for anything that can hurt me. So, because
Okay.
I've had a lot of things happen. So,
Sure.
I immediately look for weapons. I assess my situation. I still do that today. I walk into a room and I assess the room, so, it's just kind of something I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Survivorship. It's
Right.
survivorship.
So I grabbed the flashlight, I put it between me and the door, and it's crazy because I was sitting there looking at him, and he turns his head to kind of look around to see if anybody's looking or any lights are on, and he reaches for the flashlight and it's not there. And so he kind of looks at me surprised, and he's like, I'm like, oh, are you looking for this? So
Yeah.
So then he starts digging around, in his pants pockets, and just digging around the pocket on his door and things of that nature, going through papers and stuff. And I'm like, hey, look, if you don't have any money, that's fine. I'll just get out here. So next thing I know, he whips out a knife and he starts coming towards my face. And so I grabbed the flashlight and I hit him in the head a couple of times. Well, he was a very large gentleman, and I had my hair in a ponytail. So he grabs my head and pushes it down to the seat and then kind of flops himself on top of my head so I can't breathe. I literally couldn't breathe because he was a very, very large gentleman. And I was fighting for air and I was trying to slide out from under him, and my hips got caught between the seat and the dashboard. So I was kind of stuck. During that time, he had managed to get the flashlight away from me and started bashing me in the head with it. And I opened the door to slide out because my hips were already out from under him. But when I opened the door to slide out, all of the bumping around made the car rock, and so it shut again. I had a lot of difficulty. I mean, like all of the while he's bashing me in the head with this flashlight as hard as he can. And I finally managed to get out and out from under him and start screaming, even though it didn't seem like it was very loud at that point.
Yes.
I'd say two more blows and I would have been completely unconscious, if not dead. I stumbled. I grabbed my stuff, what I could anyway. I had a plastic bag of like candy and stuff like that with me, and I grabbed my stuff and kind of just like stumbled down the parking lot towards a door that I knew, one of my dealers actually. And I before I could even get there, I collapsed. I kind of collapsed on the stairway and barely touched the door. I mean, I didn't even have the strength to knock on the door. I just kind of rubbed my hand on the door as I collapsed, and the door opens and they pulled me in the house and were like, oh my God, what happened? And I couldn't even say anything. I mean, they had to hold me up. They didn't know who I was until they kind of moved all my hair out of, because at that time my hair was a lot longer and it was full of blood. And so they just kind of moved my hair and lifted my face and were like, oh my God, it's you. What happened? So, yeah, there was, I think that was the one you're talking about.
Yeah, it is. And, I have one that's very relative to that. About 5 years ago, one of the cartels had located me here in Washington State. And I remember this guy coming up to my door. It was around midnight. And he knocks on the door, and I get up out of bed from a dead sleep. So I'm groggy. I'm not totally in tune with what's going on. And I'm looking through my security door, and I see this guy wearing a tow truck driver's shirt and baseball cap. And it had his name on one side, the name company on the other. And I asked him if I could help him. And he says, do you own that yellow Corvette Stingray out and back? And I said, I do. And he said, well, listen, I was moving a car and I backed into your Corvette and I did some damage to it. Could you come down and take a look at it so we can fill out the report for him? And not thinking, not being aware, being totally let down at guard, kind of like what happened to you when you stepped in that car. I went down those stairs, and as I bent down to look at the damage on the car, I realized it was a hit. And
Mm.
as he was stabbing me in the head, and as I was losing consciousness, I felt in that instant that I was dying. I knew that I was dying. And it was really amazing, Lisa, because in that moment, I also let go of this world. I was ready and accepted that I wasn't going to make it. And within the next few seconds, death was going to occur. And what happened was on the last knife strike, I lost consciousness and hit the ground. And for some reason, the assassin had thought that he had done his job, that I was dead, and he took off. And it was like a lightning bolt that came through me sometime later. I have no idea of the time. Like you, when you're in that moment, when you're in the heat of that situation. And I crawled to one of my tenants' doors and I barely knocked on the door in and out of consciousness. And they came out, they grabbed me, they 911'd it in. Paramedics came. Uh, the, the wounds were extreme in my head, and they rushed me to, to the hospital right away. Got me to a forensic nurse who was questioning. I kept explaining to them, this is a cartel kill order. It's a failed kill order. It's a failed. But they didn't put it down in their reports. And I can remember seeing so frustrated. Yeah, you understand. And I remember being so frustrated because why the hell would you leave something out of a report as significant as a cartel kill order? And it's, I think sometimes that what the police do is they assess a situation based on so many situations that they're in, and they don't know the person, so they don't know that we're telling them the truth. We're trying to explain, but they also, some of them, not all of them, will look down on us because of who we are and because of what we're involved with at that time in our life. And hell, I'd been out of the drug trade for 20 some odd years by then. I was a known pastor in my community that worked specifically in trap houses and homeless camps. I was known, and that's what the frustration lied. But I will say this in defense to the police department. About a month after I recovered and got back into the sanctity of my secured home, one of those two officers did come by, shook my hand, said, "I'm grateful that you're alive." Said, "Boy, that was really something." And I asked him, "Why didn't you put in your report that I informed you that this was a cartel kill order?" And he wouldn't answer the question. He simply said to me, "I just wanted to come by and see that you're okay. Take care, Dr. Bradley." And
So
left.
that is a very familiar type of scenario, as far as things of that nature. So like someone in my line of work wouldn't have gone. I didn't go to the hospital. No, we don't report these things, which is really unfortunate.
Yes.
Number one, because we get treated differently when we enter a hospital. We get treated differently by the police. We get literally treated by like a pariah by
Yes.
everyone in the
Yes.
community. Even when I was pulled into a car pregnant, 7.5 months pregnant, not working the street, just trying not to be at home when my significant other brought another woman home and told me to go somewhere because we're going to bed. I mean, like even in moments like that, when I was pulled into a car and brutally beaten and raped, I was treated differently by the policeman because I had a record of prostitution. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, we're stigmatized. I get it. I get it. That's
yeah,
exactly how they look at it. But in
yeah,
all fairness, in the 19 years that I've been working out here on the streets, that is the reason why so many people are brought to my house because they
yeah,
know that I'm not going to turn them in. I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to assess their situation in the moment and then make a decision what is best for that person.
yes,
And that basically like what you do today, how you work with so many victimized people out there, and they know that they come to you because you are a sanctuary. You're a safe person. And this takes years to develop. It doesn't happen overnight.
yes,
But we have shared experiences that people can relate to. So they tend to come to us and trust us more because they know that we are compassionate. We do understand. We are going to listen to what they have to share with us. And then only do we assess the direction that we need to go with them. I have rape victims brought here frequently.
absolutely.
I have people that are beaten to a pulp brought to me. I have overdose cases brought to me, and they're not brought to the hospital. And I've had people ask me, why don't they just go to emergency? And you hit it on the head. Go down there to be demeaned, looked at like you're less than human. And not only that, but worry about getting arrested because you got felony warrants and you're going to go to jail
Yep.
and get dope sick. It's not our post to judge somebody about getting dope sick. It's our position to serve God and to help them in the capacity that warrants their needed help in that moment. And I commend
Yes.
you on that. I know I've followed you now for years, as you know. We communicate quite a bit back and forth, and I see the transformation from going from a comforter to now where you are a counselor. And
Yes.
as we get ready to wrap up the show today, Lisa, can you take a few minutes and explain the programs that you're in right now, the work that you're doing in the Portland area?
Yes, well, I'm the chairwoman and CEO of an organization called Little Sisters Foundation. That foundation actually has been in business for about 35 years in the country of Nepal. They, in that time, they created safe houses for children who were being literally sold into brothels or kidnapped and sent to brothels. In the country of Nepal. I believe they've rescued almost 9,000 children over the years,
Wow.
educated them, gave them medical services and a safe place to live, and basically improved every aspect of their life while they could. They brought the organization back to the United States right about the same time that I chose to get clean and sober. And when they heard my story, they asked me if I wanted to take over the organization. And I mean, early in my recovery, I was still struggling with the, who am I? Why am I
Yeah.
here? All of those things, so I was really reluctant. Since then, I have educated myself I'm a certified recovery mentor, certified through MACBO here in Portland. I'm also a peer support specialist in adult addictions, certified through the State of Oregon Office of Equity and Inclusion, Traditional Health Workers. I took that even a step further and got certified in human rights so that I can educate communities about human rights and what they look like and what it looks like when they're being violated. I also uh, kept on that journey with anti-trafficking. So I was certified by the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights on anti-trafficking, so that I can educate not just my community, but any community about the dangers of trafficking, what trafficking looks like, how to report it, how to assist if there's someone in trouble. I plan to, with the organization, my vision for my role in the organization is not to just build safe houses across the United States and anywhere else, really, but band together with all of the other world organizations that are also fighting human trafficking, because this is literally a global problem.
Yes, it is.
In the United States, I founded an organization called the Bullier House that will be safe houses for. I plan to build safe houses starting here in Portland, Oregon, for people with domestic violence and anyone. The most targeted individuals for trafficking are boys 12 to 17 at this time. So definitely they are after our children. So I plan to continue my education, and I plan to continue my trajectory in the recovery community and in these person-centered services, peer-delivered services. I'm currently the lead case manager for the Bobby Lakes Hope Center here in Portland,
Wonderful.
Oregon, and am working very closely with a lot of domestic violence survivors and persons who are experiencing homelessness. I think it is the most rewarding job I could ever do is helping people. Like I said earlier, it makes my suffering make sense. Everything that I pass along to the people that I work with is something that I'm also working on or have worked on. I know thousands of members of the Oregon, or should I say Portland, Oregon recovery community. We have a very strong community of recovery here in Portland. A lot of the people in the recovery have a very similar childhood story, a lot of trauma, a lot of coercion. It really, when I got to recovery and started hearing other people say the same thing, like I thought I was alone in the world. Literally, I thought I was the only person that ever had these things happen, but I'm not at all. And that tells me that there's a desperate need for the types of services, honesty, transparency, it's very difficult, especially for people who identify as the male gender, to open up and say, yes, I was touched this way as a child, and things like that. I mean, like, we need to be
Yes.
honest. We need to get real, just honest with what life was like for us, you know, and I think be loud about it. You know, there's a saying, recover out loud. You know what I mean? And so
Yes, I
sharing my
do.
story helps everyone. You know, sharing my story will help. It will empower someone somewhere.
Ab-
You know, and
Absolutely.
that will change their life.
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. And I want to thank you so very much for coming on my show today. You were the reason that I picked you to be the very first episode of the Crisis
Thank you.
Victory Show. Yeah, I thank you too. And I ask God to bless you every single day and those you work with. I can't tell you how proud of you that I am because you obviously know how far we've come together in the years of knowing one another. And I've seen this journey, I've seen your manifestation to serving people, and I've seen the truths in it. So, as we conclude today, if you have any final message that you'd like to give to my audience, I'd love for you to share it at this time. Please, the floor is yours.
Just yes, my encouragement for the audience, anyone who's listening, is if you know anyone who is being traumatized in any way, shape, or form, be it by a family member or someone in the community, please, if you see something, say something. If they come to you, protect them. Reach out. You can find services. We are all over the place. You just got to keep looking. We'll find you too.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so very much.
Mhm.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed our show today, I would absolutely ask you to like, share, and subscribe to the Crisis Victory Show. Our next guest that will be coming up, hopefully within the week, will be somebody who was also in the sex trafficking trade. He was kidnapped here in the United States and taken to Mexico, where he was strapped to a bed for 2 years and was assaulted every day of his life. How he survived it, how he came back through it, and what he is doing with his life today will be shared with you in the following episode. Lisa, you know I love you. God
I
bless
love
you,
you too,
sister.
Pastor.
Can't
Thank you.
wait to
You
get
too.
and I can't wait to come down to Portland and have a greasy cheeseburger with you, buddy.
Yes. Yes. Make sure you share the other gentleman's story with me. I would love to hear that as well. That is definitely something that I would love to use on my websites as well,
Yeah,
because
absolutely. It's
we need
very,
to be
very,
real honest about it.
yeah, it's very powerful. I mean, what he went through and what you've gone through and what so many out there have gone through. Lisa, it takes people like you and the next guest that'll be following you to put the word out, to let them know that
Yeah.
there is an area of help. There is a place you can go to where you're not going to get arrested because of what you just survived. We need to sit there and support these communities, if you will, like you and I are both doing today, with no reservation, nothing holding us
Yes.
back. It's the grace of God, and He gets the glory as a result of our.
Amen.
I know, sister. I love you, Lisa. Have a great day, and
I
God
love you
bless
too.
you. Thank
All
you for
right.
being on the
Bye
show.
bye.
Bye, honey. Bye.